Senator Sanders, thank you for taking the time to chat with us and Little Village Magazine.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so one of the first questions I want to ask right out of the gates here, there's been a good number of prominent female feminist writers, Kate Harding and Roxane Gay, who have said, although they admire your policies, they would like to see a woman in office, and that is something that's very important to them and women all across this country. How do you respond to that?
Well, I respond to that is that I would hope that all of us want to break down every sexist barrier that exists. We would like to see a woman in the White House. We'd like to see more women governors, senators, and members of the House. But I think at this particular moment in American history, when this country faces enormous problems, when the middle class of this country is disappearing, when we have 45 million people living in poverty, when we have massive levels of income and wealth inequality, when millions of workers are working 2 or 3 jobs because their wages are inadequate, we need leadership in this country to take on the billionaire class, which has so much influence and power over our economy. We need to change an economic system in which almost all new income and wealth is going to the top 1%. Those are the issues that have got to be addressed. And I hope that people will look at the candidates and what they're saying about those issues and the record they have had throughout their lifetimes in fighting for working families and make their decision in determining who will be the best candidate for President of the United States.
So there are 2 women running for President of the United States, so far as I know right now, Carly Fiorina and Hillary Clinton. Are you suggesting that your vision for America is better than their vision for America, regardless of sex or gender?
Well, I don't think that anybody, the short answer to your question is obviously yes. I think if you look at a vision for America, what does that mean? It means who are you going to stand up and fight for? And I am going to fight for, as I have throughout my entire life, fighting for the working families of this country, who in many instances are seeing their standard of living going down. I am going to be a leader, as I have been, in taking on the billionaire class. Now you'll have to ask the other candidates, women and men, what their views are on this issue. What we need to do as a country is say, what are the problems facing America? Who is going to solve them the best? I would urge people to go to my website, berniesanders.com, hear what I have to say, and let people make their own determination.
Excellent. Senator Sanders, I want to move on to your positions on the conflicts happening right now between Israel and Palestine. You've recently been endorsed by Cornel West, who is a sort of superstar scholar of sorts. Cornel West was quoted here, in terms of foreign policy, on the one hand, we have escalating anti-Jewish hatred around the world, and we've got to fight against that hatred under all conditions. He was critical of your past positions towards Israel and Palestine, and saying, I don't hear my dear brother Bernie hitting that, and I'm not going to sell my precious Palestinian brothers and sisters down the river on U.S. politics. How might you respond to that, and can you just give us a general overview of your position towards Israel and Palestine relations?
Sure. I think what the United States needs is to have an even-handed policy toward Israel and toward the Palestinians. I think that what we need to guarantee and make certain is that Israel can exist in peace and security, and that the Palestinians have their own independent state and an economy which allows their people to have a decent standard of living. I did not attend the joint session of Congress in which Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke because A, I thought it was pretty much of a campaign ploy. He was running for re-election. And second of all, I disagreed with many of the policies that he is advocating. So I think what you need for that region, and God knows this conflict has been a horrendous conflict that has gone on decade after decade after decade. I don't know that anyone has any magical answer, but I think the role that the United States can play is to bring people together and develop a fair and even-handed proposal toward both sides.
Okay, and how does a President Sanders approach the policy your first couple months in office? How would you approach policy specifically directed at Israel and Palestine and bringing those
Well, look,
two opposing
I'm not going to
entities
sit
together.
here and tell you that I have a magical solution that has eluded every president. This is
Right.
tough stuff. And you have forces on both sides in terms of the Israel-Palestinian conflict who have been counterproductive. No question about it. I think the best that we can do is, over a period of time, try to bring the different sides together. I think our goal should be to see more economic assistance to the people in that region rather than just military assistance. Right now, as you know, the United States provides substantial amounts of military aid to both Israel and to Egypt. I would hope that in years to come, the amount of military aid could be reduced and in fact could be substituted with economic aid. There is a lot of economic misery within the Palestinian community. The recent war in Gaza made a terrible situation even worse. They need help, and I would hope that we can move in that direction.
I want to move on to the Black Lives Matter movement. You were interrupted at a Netroots event and at a campaign event, and you have since rolled out some pretty comprehensive policy to address the concerns of the Black Lives Matters movement. That campaign is seeking substantive, societal, and policy changes that are going to address the racial injustices in this country. You obviously have a long history of civil rights advocacy as well. How are you going to go about this campaign to continue making racial justice a priority?
Well, I have, as you've indicated, been involved in the civil rights movement for my entire adult life. And I think if you check the record, you'll find very few members of the United States Congress who have a stronger record than I do on civil rights. Here are the immediate concerns, and we don't have the many hours we need to go into all of the details, but here's the immediate concerns that I have. For a start, we have more people in jail in the United States of America than any other country on earth. China is a communist, authoritarian country, 3-4 times our size. We have more people in jail than China does. So clearly we have a failed criminal justice system. Lives are being destroyed every single day. Well, what are some of the things that we have to do? First, I think we need to create police departments who are, as you know, locally controlled, but the federal government can influence them through Model I programs. We need to create police departments which are seen as part of the community and are part of the community rather than being seen as oppressive forces. For example, if you turn on the TV and you look at a television, you look at a police department that looks like an invading army with heavy-duty military equipment, this is not a police department that people in that community feel comfortable with. When I was mayor of Burlington, we worked toward community policing. You're a local cop. I can come up to you and say, there's a crack house down the road. You got to do something about it because we're on the same side. That's number one. Number two, you want police departments that reflect the diversity of the community. You want police officers to look like the people they serve. Number three, you want to take a hard look at the protocol regarding use of force. I think, in fact, you have many police officers in this country, and I'm a former mayor again, and I work with police department. Anyone thinks being a cop today is an easy job is sorely mistaken. It is a tough job. Many of these guys are underpaid, undertrained. They work crazy schedules. So we need well-trained, well-policed officers. We need new protocols regarding the use of force. What a good cop can do, and it is not easy, is try to calm down a situation. Using lethal force is the very, very last option. You know, when a cop's life is in danger, yeah, you can use lethal force. But you want to use that as the last option, and too often that has not been the case. To keep people out of jail, I think we want to take a hard look at the war on drugs. We want to make sure that we're not ruining people's lives because they, are caught with some marijuana, for example. We want to take a look at minimal sentencing so that people are not sent away for minor crimes. We want to make sure that when people have served their time, there is a path out of prison into civil society so that we don't have the outrageously high rates of recidivism that we do today. We have to obviously hold police officers accountable. If a police officer or any public official breaks the law, that person has got to be held accountable. So those are just a few. And the last one, when I return to Congress next week, we will be introducing legislation to get private corporations out of the business of running and building penitentiaries and jails. I don't think people should be profiting off of the incarceration of fellow Americans. So that's just a small part of what we have to do. But I think bottom line is we've got to fight institutional racism in this country. I think we have made progress in the last number of decades. And we also, though, have got to go forward in a very vigorous way in repairing a broken criminal justice system.
One of the things you mentioned in that answer had to do with sort of reforming or reevaluating the war on drugs and how effective we've been. One of the issues that hasn't gotten a whole lot of play in this presidential campaign so far, and not only yours, but the campaign of others, is the decriminalization of marijuana. Do you have a policy position on that?
Well, my state of Vermont has decriminalized marijuana, and I support that.
Okay.
In other words, if you are possessing a small amounts of marijuana, it should not be a criminal offense, it should be a civil. You might want to pay a fine on that. I support marijuana use for medical purposes, and we're exploring the pluses and minuses, of which there are both, of moving more aggressively on that area. It is a very important issue. We're watching what Colorado is doing, and we'll have more to say about that in the coming weeks and months.
So do you believe it is the purview of the federal government to legislate the criminalization of marijuana?
What the federal government can do is say to the state of Colorado that if you choose to vote to legalize marijuana, we will allow you to do that without restrictions. In other words, right now, as I understand it, in Colorado, people who run marijuana shops can't put their money in banks, for example. That's in violation of federal law. So I think there are things that the federal government can do that would make it easier for states that want to go in that direction to be able to do so.
Would you be in favor of having the federal government be more active in moving towards that direction?
That's something we will have more to say about. It's a very good question, and it's a fair question. Let me not jump on what I want to be more thoughtful about in the coming weeks and months.
Sure, sure. I want to move on to student loan reform and college affordability. This is an issue in which you've unveiled a plan that is very, very ambitious. I read a little bit about it, and what some folks in the media are calling a Robin Hood tax to assess earnings on hedge fund managers and taxing capital gains and derivatives to help pay for this very ambitious plan. Talk to me how you make this a reality if you are elected president.
Well, the issue of how we make progressive policies a reality goes much further than just making sure that public colleges and universities are tuition free. It's what I call the need for a political revolution, the need to transform politics in America. So when I speak to people and when I campaign, what I am saying is, yeah, I'd love to have your vote, of course. I want to see Bernie Sanders elected president, but that's not enough. We need a political revolution which brings tens of millions of people together in a way that we are not right now, so that we can stand up to the people in this country who truly have the power. We don't talk about this enough. Now, if you had the best person in the history of the world to be elected president of the United States, do you think that person could in fact raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, as I would like to see? Do you think that person could play a vigorous role in transforming our nation's energy system away from fossil fuel and lead the world in combating climate change? Do you think that person can move aggressively in ending the situation where women are making 78 cents on the dollar compared to men? Do you think we can do all the things that we have to do? The answer is no. Because the President of the United States is not the most powerful person in this country. It's Wall Street, it's the large campaign donors, it is the corporate media, it is the folks who have the economic and political power in this country. So what I have been saying, whether it is student debt or making public colleges and universities tuition free, we need a mass movement. Now, if millions of people Tell Washington, D.C., and tell the United States Congress, you know, it's pretty crazy that our kids can't afford to go to college. Other countries are providing free tuition to their kids. We can do it in America. We will do it. And the way we will pay for that is a tax on Wall Street speculation. Now, do you think a president goes in and tells Wall Street, oh, by the way, I have a great idea. I think you're going to have to pay some $70, $100 billion a year more in taxes. What do you think, guys? Ready to move? They're not going to move. But when tens of millions of people are united in supporting that legislation, it will move. Now, I've said this many, many times, and let me repeat it to you. Barack Obama is a friend of mine. I've known Obama for many, many years. He was kind enough to come to Vermont to campaign for me when I won my seat in the U.S. Senate. I have campaigned for him. The major political, I have disagreements with him on certain policy issues. The major political disagreement I have with Obama is that after he ran his brilliant campaign in 2008, where he energized America, young people, people all across the political spectrum, brought them together, he basically said, thank you very much for electing me. I will take it from here. He made a mistake. The only way you transform America is when millions of people are standing behind a progressive agenda. President can lead, can't do it alone. So, in terms of your point, I think it is insane that in a highly competitive global economy, we got hundreds of thousands of bright, qualified young people who should be in college, who want to be in college, but can't go there for one reason: their family does not have the money. Does that make sense for the future of this country? We need doctors and scientists and dentists and teachers. We need a whole bunch of professionals out there. These young people can't do it because they don't have the money. So what I am saying, yeah, we're going to make public colleges and universities tuition free. We're going to do it by putting a tax on Wall Street speculation. And by the way, we're going to substantially lower interest rates on student debt, because if you can refinance your home today at 2 or 3%, why are you paying 8 or 10% on your student debt? That's pretty crazy. We're going to get the government out of profiteering on high interest rates held by working class families. So point being, whether it is climate change, whether it is the need to create millions of decent paying jobs, rebuilding our infrastructure, whether it's raising the minimum wage, whatever it may be, the only way we succeed is when people come together, and that's what we're trying to do in this campaign. Sorry for the long answer, but that is essentially what my campaign is about.
Got it. You made the point about President Obama's biggest political mistake to the Des Moines Register's editorial board. I believe that was yesterday. Yeah. How would you do things differently? How would you keep the millions of people that built his coalition at the table if elected?
Well, it's a great question, and it's not easy. I think certainly social media will play an active role, but you got to demand it of it. In other words, what you have to say is, okay, let's get back to this issue of making public colleges and universities tuition free. My perception is the vast majority of the people think it's a great idea. The vast majority of the American people think that given the fact we bailed out Wall Street, maybe it's time that Wall Street helped the middle class. So what does the president have to do? The president has to say, look, there is a piece of legislation going to be on the floor of the Senate and on the floor of the House. It's S-398. It is coming up next Thursday. I want you to be out there. I want you to be on the phone. I want you to tell your senators, you know, Senator X, Senator Y is not supporting it. I will be in your state so that a few 100,000 of us can say hello to your senator and about the need to support this legislation. That's what political leadership is about. It is bringing people together with a progressive agenda led by a president. But a president can't do it alone. It means having the trade union movement. And as soon as I leave this interview, I'm going to be walking on a picket line with workers who, like many other workers in this country, are fighting against an employer who wants to lower their standard of living. We ought to bring blacks and whites and Hispanics and gays and straight and women and men and people born in this country, people not born in this country, bring them together around a progressive agenda, an agenda that I think we have done a good job in presenting.
One of the things I want to get back to, we talked a little bit about gun violence reform and gun violence prevention. Now, in looking over your record, when you were a member of Congress, you voted against the Brady bill. You said something to the effect that the federal government can do a better job, or that the states and not the federal government can do a better job with legislating mandatory waiting periods for gun purchases. You have at times had high ratings from various entities in the gun lobby, and you have at times had low ratings.
No. Get the facts right.
So you've not had high marks from any entity in the gun lobby before?
Nope.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I think if you go to the NRA, check it out, if I am not mistaken, my lifetime voting record is D-, not an F, D-, not
Okay.
exactly one of the stalwarts of the NRA. Sometimes, for political reasons, there's a lot of misstatement of facts.
Okay.
So let me just state a few of the facts. I
Okay.
come from a state that has virtually no gun control. That's the state I represent. And we have had Democratic governors who are well known. We've had Republican governors who are well known, and that is their view. Yet despite that, what I have voted for is very strong instant background checks, which is ultimately the most important issue. In other words, what we want to make sure is that if somebody purchases a gun, that person does not have a criminal background record, that person does not have mental illness, that we are assured as best we can that that person is not going to use the gun to go around killing other people. So I have been and am a very strong supporter of instant background checks, keeping guns away from people who should not have them. That's number one. Number two, a very difficult vote coming from my state. You know, it's easy for people to come from other states. I come from a state, when you talk about guns, you know what you're talking about? You're talking about hunting. Most of the people in my state hunt, and they do target practice. That's what guns are in my state. And what people in Vermont do understand is that guns in urban cities are something very different. Not used for hunting, it's used for killing people, and I think people in Vermont understand that. But what I did is cast a very tough vote to ban certain types of assault weapons. Thirdly, what I voted for is what we call the gun show loophole, which is a huge loophole which enables some gun distributors who are not registered to be able to sell guns without people having to go through a background check. All right? So I have a strong record. And what I have said, and let me repeat, coming from a rural state which has virtually no gun control, I think I am in a strong position to try to overcome the shouting and the yelling which has gotten us nowhere for many, many years. All right? I understand there are some people in this country who want to ban every gun in America. Ain't gonna happen. And there are some people who think that any form of gun control is terrible. Ain't gonna happen. What I think where we are at this moment is trying to bring together people for sensible gun control all over this country. People are disgusted and outraged by what we are seeing every day, it seems, on television. Some person, you know, with problems is going around shooting other people. And by the way, let me add something to that also. If you think we're going to deal with the violence that we're having without also significantly expanding mental health capabilities in this country, you would be surely mistaken. I get calls in my office, and I'm sure other senators do as well, about people and family members who are desperately seeking mental health counseling. They are worried about what their brothers, their husbands are going to do, and they can't find that counseling. So a lot of things that we have to do, but I think I am in a good position to bring people together for gun control legislation which is sensible, and I think we can bring the consensus on that.
I know we are running short on time here, so I'll try to ask these next few questions as quickly as possible to try to get some rapid fire answers from you. Who do you feel is your toughest opponent in this primary, and who do you feel might be your toughest opponent in the general election?
Well, obviously I am running against a woman who is known by almost everybody in America, whose husband was president of the United States, who ran for president in 2008, who has, you know, a whole lot of strong support. We started this campaign 4 months ago as very, very strong underdogs compared to Secretary Clinton. There's no arguing that. When I started this campaign, look at the polls 3-4 months ago, I was at 3%, 5%, 6%. What has happened in the last 4 months is I think our campaign has kind of caught fire. A lot of energy, a lot of momentum, huge turnouts in Iowa, all over the country, because people, I think, are responding to our message that we need a government which represents working families and not just billionaires. I don't have a super PAC. I'm raising funds from individual contributors. So there's no question to my mind that in the Democratic primary, Hillary Clinton is the leader now. The election were held today, Hillary Clinton would win it. But I think we are closing that gap here in Iowa. I think we're a little bit ahead in New Hampshire now, and I think momentum is with us. In terms of the general election, hard to say. I think that the issues that we're raising are creating a lot of excitement. What I'm especially delighted about is seeing a lot of young people coming out to our rallies and our town meetings, which tells me that if we can continue generating the kind of energy and enthusiasm, that will result in very large voter turnouts. What I have said recently before the Democratic National Committee is that the Republicans did not win the last midterm election in November. The Democrats lost it. And the Democrats lost it because voter turnout was embarrassingly, horrendously low. 80% of kids, young people, didn't vote. 63% of Americans didn't vote. You're not going to win elections under those scenarios. I think our campaign can generate enthusiasm, increase voter turnout. If we do that, we're going to win this election.
I have two more questions for you. So I will not be able to get away from this interview with at least just hitting on climate change. You have a very strong record on climate change. It's been staked out. You've talked about it. One thing I haven't heard a lot of candidates talk about is the renewable fuel standards and where the different candidates stand on that particular piece of policy. Has your campaign put out any policy positions on that yet?
But number one, let me respond to you. I agree with almost all scientists who study the issue that climate change is not only real and caused by human activity, and not only that it's already causing devastating problems in our country and around the world. This is a global crisis. And if we don't get our act together and be extraordinarily bold and aggressive in addressing it, the planet we're going to be leaving our children and our grandchildren in many ways may not be a habitable planet. They're talking about the end of this century, this planet being 5 to 10 degrees warmer. We have got to be very aggressive. So I applaud Iowa, by the way, for being, along with my state, by the way, one of the leaders in terms of wind and in terms of biofuels. I support the renewable fuel standards. I think we have to move to a cellulosic ethanol aggressively, which is more efficient than the current fuel. But I am a great, what I believe is absolutely that we have to break our dependency on fossil fuel.
You voted against going to war in Iraq. You have voted against the Patriot Act and its reauthorizations. In Iraq, we know now that there were no weapons of mass destruction. We have seen, at least seen allegations of wrongdoing by civilian contractors that were there. And we've been through the whole enhanced interrogation song and dance by members of the intelligence community here in America. Do you believe, Senator Sanders, that the United States violated any international law during that incursion in Iraq? And if so, should members of the Bush administration be held accountable for that?
There are, well, let me just back up and say, yes, I did vote against the war in Iraq. And if you go to YouTube and listen to some of the speeches that I gave, and I say this without any joy in my heart, much of what I feared would happen, in fact, did happen. And I would say the war in Iraq will go down in history as one of the worst foreign blunders, certainly in the modern history of America. I think, furthermore, that torture should not be what the United States of America is about. I think we should hold people accountable who made that decision.
Who?
But I'm not going to tell you that that is, at this particular moment, one of my great priorities. I mean, to be honest with you, this country today faces enormous issues. We have a collapsing middle class, massive wealth and inequality. We have 10% of our people are unemployed. 51% of African American kids are unemployed. Those are the major issues. But I think looking back on the history of Iraq and what the Bush administration did, the lesson there is to learn that lesson and not to do that again.
Last question. You recorded a folk album in 1987 and you were somehow passed over at least for a Grammy nominee.
I don't know. That's what can I tell you?
How do you feel about being passed over for a Grammy in that
when
folk
I have
album
clearly one of the great voices in this country? It's just one of those things. It is an outrage.
One of those things.
No, my God. If I knew now what I knew then, I would not have walked into that studio, but it was a lot of fun that evening. It was a great band and a guy who produced records in Burlington, Vermont. We had a lot of fun. But I think the lesson to be learned, do not vote for Bernie Sanders solely based on his singing capabilities. There are other reasons to vote for me, not on singing. All right?
Senator Sanders, thank you so much for your
Thank you,
time.
Stacey.
We really appreciate it.